So, good afternoon to everyone. This is your COG Board Chair, Christian Dorsey, presiding over today's meeting. Thank you all for joining us virtually for our October meeting, excuse me. As is customary, I'd like for us to begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. So, if you all will join me, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, thank you all very much. And since we are resuming our virtual meetings, I'd like to just offer a couple of reminders. If you are to keep your microphones muted, that would greatly assist in the quality of today's meeting for all participants. If you would like to speak, go ahead and unmute your line and then be sure to remute when you are done. Also, we have the chat box, which is fully monitored for you to communicate with other participants in the meeting, including me. But also, if you have questions and want to get in the queue, COG staff is also actively monitoring the chat so we can be sure it's COG's website and through our YouTube account. So it will be available for contemporaneous viewing and archived later on. Before we get started, why don't we start with our roll call, and I'll turn it over to Monica Baruti Nunez, who will document your presence at the meeting. Monica, over to you.
Thank you. For the District of Columbia, I have Charles Allen and Eugene Kinlow. Is there anyone else present from the district?
Yes, this is Beverly Perry.
Okay, thank you. For Maryland, I have Michael O'Connor, Denise Mitchell, Craig Moe, Sydney Harrison, Bridget Newton, Kate Stewart, Tara Jackson, Joy Schaefer. Is there anyone else present from Maryland?
Emmett Jordan is here from Greenbelt, Maryland.
Thank you.
Rich Madalino from Montgomery County.
Thank you. From Virginia, I have Justin Wilson, Christian Dorsey, Penny Gross, David Snyder, Julie Briskman, Phyllis Randall, Mark Wolf, Ann Wheeler, Andrea Bailey. Is there anyone else present? Rodney Lusk. Is there anyone else present from Virginia?
George Barker.
Thank you. All right, we have a quorum. I'll turn it back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Monica. It seems like we have a robust quorum. Haven't had this many in a while, so it's grateful to have you all with us, and particularly those who are coming from the Maryland and Virginia legislatures. We know you can't always be with us, but we certainly do appreciate it when you are here. So otherwise, I'd just like to remind everyone of the COG annual meeting, which is scheduled for December 14th, 2022 in downtown Washington, D.C. And hopefully everyone can attend. That will, of course, be in person. And I strongly encourage everyone to also be mindful that at that annual meeting, we award several awards, and you have an opportunity to nominate your peers or partner organizations for one of those prestigious awards. Now, there will be a link that's put into the chat box, but we encourage your nominations. We'd ask that you do so by the extended deadline, which is now going to be Wednesday, a week from today, October 19th. So please don't hesitate to get your submissions in, where we can honor some noteworthy individuals and organizations who have helped to move our region forward. If you have any questions about the nominations or the awards themselves, please contact Pat Warren. She'll be happy to assist you. That concludes my chairman's report. I'd like to now turn it over to Mr. Bean for the executive director's report.
Thank you, Chair Dorsey. Three things. First, on the Region United Framework, I had the opportunity to present this past month to the Greater Washington Community Foundation. Also at a grand opening for a fabulous new affordable housing development near the Virginia Square Metro Station called Terwilliger Place. And also to a dozen staff of the Metropolitan Council, which is in Minneapolis, St. Paul, And to give context, the Metropolitan Council could be described as a combination of COG, WMATA, and the water utilities all combined together into one agency. I also want to highlight a recent article that Greater Washington did on Region United. It's in the board packets on page 6, and appreciate if staff could drop a link into the chat to the GGW site. Second, Food and Water Security Summit. Yesterday, COG hosted a regional food and water supply chain summit. This planning effort is led by the district's Homeland Security and Emergency Management Agency through regional preparedness funding. Yesterday, we had about 65 in-person attendees and several virtual participants. Together, they reviewed the regional supply chain threats and a new framework to guide food and water response. The summit yesterday informed the framework, which will be completed by the end of this year. Third, on air quality, a summary of this season's ozone season was presented last month at MWEC. We've made tremendous progress this last year, only 3 code orange days and no code red days. When I moved here 30 years ago, there were 33 code orange days, 13 code red days, 1 code purple day. This last 3 years has been the best 3 years since COG began tracking air pollution in 1970. I think the moral of the story is foreshadowing our report in item 10 today on climate goals. The takeaway is that this region can set big goals and can achieve them. My written report is on page 17 of the board packet. Pleased to answer any questions from the board. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Bean. Are there any questions for our executive director? Wonderful. And I know that we're all greatly satisfied and thrilled at the progress that we've made with air quality. And as you've said, this foreshadows very nicely an item later on in today's agenda. And with that, also our next item on the agenda is to consider any proposed amendments to our agenda this afternoon. Are there any proposed amendments? Seeing and hearing none, we'll now move on with consideration of the minutes from our September 14th meeting. You've had an opportunity to review those. At any time, I'll accept a motion to approve said minutes.
Mr. Chairman, Penny Gross moves approval.
Thank you,
Chairman,
Ms. Gross.
second, Denise Mitchell.
Thank you, Ms. Mitchell. So we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes from September 22nd. Move to a vote. Are there any nays? Are there any abstentions?
Chair Randall will abstain.
Thank you. Ms. Randall will abstain. And hearing no other abstentions or nay votes, the motion is hereby approved and the minutes from September 14th are accepted. We'll now move on to consideration of our consent agenda. We have 6 resolutions for you this afternoon, including the nomination of the legislative and the nominating committees for COG officers, COG board officers. We also have public safety and emergency management matters, and we also have, as is our custom, to present to the board the COG 2022 contract list of all individuals and organizations to which COG has contracts. You can find the details of those consent items on pages 25 through 27 of your board packet. And I'll entertain a motion to accept and approve the consent agenda.
Mr. Chairman, this is Penny Gross. I will move approval of the consent agenda.
So
Second,
moved by Ms.
Supervisor
Gross
Bailey.
and seconded by Ms. Bailey. Are there any abstentions? Are there any nay votes? Hearing none for either, the motion hereby passes and the consent agenda is approved. Next, we'll move on to consideration of the fiscal year 2024 member dues and regional fees. So I'd like to invite back to lead this presentation Executive Director Chuck Bean, along with our Chief Financial Officer, Julie Masag, who will brief us on the proposal for member dues and regional fees for the next fiscal year. Afterwards, the board will be asked to adopt Resolution R 47/2022 authorizing the proposal you are about to hear. Back to you, Mr. Bean.
Thank you, Mr. Dorsey. I am pleased to highlight some of the details of the FY24 dues analysis that was presented to the Budget and Finance Committee last month. I will begin and then after turn to our CFO, Julie, for additional details before handing it to COG Secretary Treasurer Lusk and the Budget and Finance Committee for their recommendation to the board. The Budget and Finance Committee, as background, consists of the Executive Committee, the COG corporate officers, the Chair of TPP, and the Chair of MWEC. Materials for this item are on page 30 of the board packet. We will walk through the slide deck found on pages 31 through 48 of the packet. And just as a reminder about the timing of the year, the board sets the dues in the fall for the fiscal year starting next July 1 in order for the member jurisdictions to be able to incorporate these assumptions as they formulate and pass their own budgets in the spring. The full COG budget will be considered by the board in late spring for the FY24 fiscal year. Next slide. From a programmatic perspective, our Region Forward vision guides our work in transportation, environment, public safety, and community planning, our core competencies. We're also making deliberate strides toward a more holistic and multidisciplinary approach, and that's seen in the Region United Planning Framework for 2030, helping us advance the board's priorities related to equity, transit, housing, and climate. Next slide, please. While we seek to add our highest value to regional collaboration and collective action, Visualize 2045, electric vehicle infrastructure planning, regional mutual aid agreements, we concurrently seek to add value to each individual jurisdiction through technical assistance, sharing of best practices and peer learning, ranging from public safety exercises to prepare against cyber threats, to the racial equity trainings that we've held for elected officials, as well as government staff in collaboration with GARE. Next slide, please. And we have internal goals to generate quantifiable value to every member jurisdiction such that they save twice as much through COG as they expend in member dues. Originally, this focused on collective buying power or cooperative procurement of commodities, but we have been introducing new opportunities to save money on such items as public safety radios for firefighters and other first responders. And now we're procuring specialized services such as consultants on climate and energy action plans. In addition to savings via collective procurement, we also return value through our growing number of grants programs, including Transportation Land Use Connections, Transit Within Reach, Regional Roadway Safety Program, Enhanced Mobility Grants, and the addition this past year of the Housing Affordability Planning Program. Next slide. Generally, COG is a forum for regional collaboration. In addition to the once-a-month board meetings, I estimate that 1,500 officials and experts connect every month through COG. The CAOs, police and fire chiefs, transportation directors, all of the water utilities. They come through COG for peer learning as well as collaborative problem solving at the regional scale. So I'd highlight two key factors going into the dues analysis this year. As background, dues is a total of the rate and the population increase. Assuming a rate increase of 2 cents, this nets a total increase to COG of $197,600. That equates to about a 4.05% total, well below annualized inflation, but we believe this sets up my successor well to execute on the Envision work plan for FY24. The other factor is some good news from the federal government affecting metropolitan planning organizations. The TBB is the metropolitan planning organization for our region. This good news comes out of the passage of the IIJA. It comes to an increase of roughly $2 million toward our transportation work program here in the region. A part of the federal rules is that this funding mandates a 10% match by localities, which we incorporate into the overall COG dues. Again, we think we can absorb this within the recommended dues level. So now I'd like to turn it to our CFO for the specifics of today's recommendation and how member dues leverage other funding and address the board's priorities for which there is not other federal or state support. So Julie, please.
Thanks, Chuck. Next slide. Thank you. This pie chart details the revenue resources at COG. As you can see, member dues provide 9% of the revenues to COG. There are 4 ways that we utilize member dues. The first one is to leverage federally sourced funds. 39% of dues goes towards this. Every dollar in dues leverages an additional $8.36 in direct federal funding. This is primarily related to transportation planning and Homeland Security Fund utilization. The second way that we utilize member dues is for primary program support. 17% of member dues provides 97% of the funding for critically important programs for health, housing, and the equity work that has no other source of funding. This would include convening regional health directors, supporting regional economic development, housing, homelessness count report, and the regional incident system. The third way that we use member dues is to leverage additional resources. This includes programs supported by regional funds. About 1.5 million of member dues leverages 7.6 million from various funding sources. And the final way that we utilize member dues is for additional member services and benefits, outreach, and forums. This includes the cooperative purchasing program and leadership training such as IRE. Next slide. The proposed structure is moving the cap and the increase for any member jurisdiction to 8%. As reference, FY23 was a 7% cap, and the increase in the rate, moving the rate from the 79 cents in FY23 to 81 cents, which is a 2.5% increase in the assessment rate. Next slide. The increase in dues will total about 4%, as Chuck noted, from FY23. This results in an additional $197,600 in member due revenue over the FY23 year. For reference, the FY23 increase was 4.72% or $220,000, and FY22 was actually an assessment rate decrease of 0.5 cent. Detail by jurisdiction of member dues can be found in the appendix. Next slide. Next slide. The regional water and environmental funds follow the same 4.05% increase as the member dues, and 2/3 of the regional water fund is paid for by water and sewer utilities. Next slide. The regional public safety fund, next slide, will also follow the 4.05% increase over the prior year. This fund supports ongoing mutual aid updates with federal partners, including National Capitol Police, National Security Council, and the police chiefs, future regional leadership training, and it also supports 9 public safety programs that are used day-to-day by your public safety officials. Next slide. Next slide. The Farm Fund, this was a new regional fund in FY23. The fee is based on program budget needs and based on population, with a maximum of $36,418 fee for large jurisdictions and a flat $2,601 fee for jurisdictions with a population under 51,000. This fund has already managed to leverage some big dollars from FEMA. The District of Columbia, in coordination with COG, partner jurisdictions throughout the metropolitan Washington region, and FEMA Region 3 have been using regional catastrophic preparedness grant program funding to help build capabilities that support logistics and supply chain management related to food and water. Current grant project work and experience from COVID-19 made it clear that catastrophic events can disrupt flows of food and water to the metropolitan Washington region, creating increased demand on government and assistant organizations at a time when overall supplies are constrained. Under this grant, knowledge gained about these complex supply chain systems will be used to develop tools and capabilities to help all regional partners better prepared to meet food and water needs during a disaster or an emergency event. Next slide. And at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Chuck.
Thank you. We're, of course, pleased to answer any questions. And Monica, let's go to the next slide. This is the, oh, yes, that one. This is in your board packet. This is member dues by jurisdictions that would have the affected increase. And the next slide, this is the application of the regional fund fees by jurisdiction or by the respective water utility. Jurisdictions on the left, and then going across the various funds. So next slide, please. Your CFO and I are happy to answer any questions. I'm going to turn it back now to Chairman Dorsey, as I'm aware that COG Treasurer Secretary Lusk and other members of the Budget and Finance Committee may wish to comment on this presentation and the recommended resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bean and Ms. Mussog. Appreciate it greatly. Before we have that conversation, I would like to offer a motion on behalf of the Budget and Finance Committee to adopt Resolution R47 2022, authorizing the FY24 proposal for dues and fees. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman, Rodney Lusk.
Thank you, Mr. Lusk, and I'll briefly speak to it and then recognize anyone else who would like to. So as the presentation outlined, the increase in fees that is proposed is what it is. And I think it was the sense of at least this member of the committee that it's a modest increase in light of the value that members get for it. But that certainly may not necessarily, be a perspective that is universally shared, whether or not it's modest. That's up to you to determine based on your own jurisdiction circumstances. I would remind you that the driver of the impact of the increase is not just the rate itself, but the projected population of your jurisdiction. And I want to remind everyone that those numbers are not COG generated, those are jurisdiction generated. So it's simply a factor of plugging in what your jurisdictions have provided with the rate increase that has been proposed. And as we think about this upcoming year and what this due structure is designed to accomplish, there is the incredible opportunity from the bipartisan infrastructure law that brings a tremendous amount of resources, $2 million to our region, but it does come with a required match, a 20% match. And if you look at that overall impact, if not accounted for, it would diminish our ability as an organization to do what I'm really proud that we've been able to do over the last last few years, and that is to respond to emerging needs and trends. Whether it is the COVID pandemic, whether it's the work that we did on equity, or the work that was done that eventually became the Standing Farm Committee, those were priorities that were sort of determined throughout the year in response to members' needs, and our ability to do so is wholly supported by the dues that we receive from member jurisdictions. And, I certainly think the principle of being able to provide at least twice as much value as members pay out in dues is a great principle, but I think it actually undersells the value that most of us receive from COG. I think if we were to add it up, both in direct and indirect ways, the leveraging of the dues that we pay to the value that we received is far greater than 2 to 1. So it was with that I was supportive of offering this for the full board's approval. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this issue?
Mr. Chairman.
I'd like to recognize Mr. Lusk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to add my voice to yours. I think this is a modest increase and something that is justifiable based on the services and the programming that we're able to achieve and benefit our communities respectively. So I just appreciate the logic in the presentation, and I also appreciated the point about how many meetings are I just wanted to proud to support this motion.
So, Mr. Lusk, we missed a piece of that because the audio got choppy. I think you were beginning to say that you very much appreciate the number of opportunities for regional leaders to meet and convene. And if there's anything else that we missed there, you can take another crack at it.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to reiterate that I'm supportive of the points that you made. I agree that this is a very dues and supports that we get. Connectivity to the community is of a great benefit. Just wanted to establish that as my reason for supporting this motion as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And thank you, Mr. Secretary Treasurer. We do appreciate it. I see Chair Randall, who would like to speak next.
Yeah, I just need a bit of clarity. I don't have any issue with the dues, but Ms. Brixton and I have something in our board called regional readouts, and so when we go back and report what happens, we have to report all of what happens. So I just want to make sure I understand something. The increase in the dues is based on the population, or is it based on the population increase or decrease after the census?
Sure. Would you like to take that, Chuck, or would you like me to? It's up to you.
Go ahead, sir.
Sure. So the if we could present the slide again, I think that would just illustrate what's going on.
That's why I'm a little confused, because I'm looking at the slide. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah. So the slide numbers are different than what you may have as the decennial census numbers and what your projections are year over year.
Okay.
COG is agnostic on that. These are provided by your own planning departments as
Okay.
to what the baseline number should be.
Okay, gotcha. And I will talk to my planning, but I have no issue with I'm just looking at the slide, and I know what I know what I believe our numbers are, so I was a little confused by it, but I will happy to have a conversation with our planning department, so thank you.
And Chair Randall, if it makes you feel any better, I think all of us on the budget committee had the same idea. Like, these are not the numbers that we are believing that are in our jurisdiction. But be that as it may, it is the numbers that our jurisdictions have provided.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. And while that is up, I cannot see the rest of the attendees, so just speak up if you would like to be recognized on this item. Seeing and hearing no other perspectives, we'll now move. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, nope. Ms. Randall, are you good? Okay. So seeing and hearing no other perspectives on this item, we'll now move to a vote. First, I'd like to actually see if there are any abstentions. Are there any nay votes? Hearing
Mr.
none
Chair.
and none.
Mr. Chair, Dave Snyder, I'll abstain on this at this point. I want to make sure that my council and management are on board. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Snyder. We'll note your abstention. We'll go back to ensure that we're capturing all sentiment. Are there any nay votes? Okay, with one abstention and hearing no nay votes, the motion hereby passes, and the FY24 proposal for member dues and regional fees is hereby adopted. We'd now like to move on to agenda item number 8, which is consideration of our FY23 and 5-year capital expenditure plan and budget. For this item, I'd like to invite our Secretary Treasurer, Rodney Lusk, who will be joined again by our CFO, Julie Mussog, to brief us on the proposed capital expenditure budget and 5-year capital expenditure plan. At the conclusion of the presentation, the board will be asked to consider and adopt Resolution R48 2022. And I will now turn it over to Mr. Lusk.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I hope you can hear me okay. I apologize for first, I'll make a couple of points. The fiscal 2023 through 2027 capital plan cover memo are included in your package on page 51. Second, this was reviewed by the Budget and Finance Committee on September 29th and unanimously approved to move forward to the full board for a vote. So with that, I'll turn it over to Julie Mussog, our CFO here, to provide additional details and to help answer any questions.
Thank you. COG presents a 5-year capital plan annually to the Budget and Finance Committee as well as the Board of Directors for approval of current year capital expenditures and then a preview of expected expenditures for the next 4 years. COG has a board designated capital expenditure reserve that is used for the purchase of long-term assets. It is replenished over time through the allocation of depreciation expense to COG's various funding sources. The FY23 through 27 capital plan proposes expenditures in FY23 of approximately $525,000 and a total of $5 million in expenditures over the next 5 years, $3.6 million of which was related to the long delayed office remodel. If you turn to page 58 of the board packet, it details the expenditures for FY23 in the amount of $525,000. Expenses are for equipment and IT expenses and leasehold improvements and furniture. $400,000 is allocated for the boardroom technology upgrade. Based on the usage and needs in what is expected to be a permanent hybrid environment, IT's analysis of the boardroom is that it will need additional upgrades beyond what was scoped in the prior year for optimal performance. The additional upgrades will include a 129-inch 4K projection display monitor, 2 large speakers, replacement of all 35 wired microphones on the dais, replacement of the podium and panel microphones, 2 new wireless microphones, installation of 4 video cameras, installation of audio and video device for recording and streaming meetings, installation of a device to allow for wireless connecting personal devices to audio and video systems in the room, touch panels to control all audio and video devices, new server rack to store equipment, and installation of new hearing impaired system with 12 receivers to allow for Wi-Fi and RF connectivity. In addition to the boardroom upgrades, $50,000 is being budgeted for the first phase of a new document management system. This was originally approved back in the FY21 budget, but implementation was delayed due to COVID. This is expected to be a 3-year project where the bulk of our documents stored offsite will be converted to digital storage and result in significant reduction in our offsite storage expenses, which is currently about $15,000 annually. I will note that we have removed everything from offsite storage, and it's starting to flow through, and we're getting this stuff scanned. It'll also eliminate the fees associated for pulling boxes from offsite storage. We have set aside $25,000 for routine replacement of IT assets, such as laptops and other peripherals, and $50,000 for some space planning design related to the delayed office remodel. If you turn to page 59 and 60, the plan shows the projected 5-year capital expenditure plan. And then on page 61, this provides a summary and a forecast of the balance of the capital expenditure reserve as of June 30th, 2023, which is estimated at about $4.9 million. Approval of the plan authorizes expenditures of $525,000 in FY23 for the assets described. The expenses noted in FY24 through 27 are presented for planning purposes only. These expenditures will be reviewed, modified, and presented to the Budget and Finance Committee and Board of Directors in subsequent fiscal years for final approval. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Massag. And we'll now move to an opportunity to facilitate questions from board members. But first, I'd like to see if there is a motion to adopt Resolution R48, 2022.
Yes,
So
Mr.
moved,
Chair.
Chair.
We'll accept Mr. Lusk's motion to approve. Is there a second?
Andrea Bailey, second.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bailey. And so let's move to discussion, and we'll start first with questions or comments from board members from Maryland. Any from board members from Maryland? All right, moving next, we'll consider questions, comments from members from the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Gross.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Certainly looking forward to the boardroom upgrades. We've talked about this for a long time. We actually have done some upgrades for those who are newer to the board, but would someone remind me what we've done as far as the staff areas? Because that was a big project, and I'm not quite sure that we ever actually got that taken care of. Could somebody remind me of that? Some of the staff areas were really, really probably OSHA violations.
So we started down the, we were sort of looking at renovating, and then there was the building sale discussion, and that actually sort of concluded right before COVID. So we have not moved forward with renovations. on the building yet at this point because we weren't in the office. And so I think we're utilizing our space in a different way. So that's part of what some of the planning money this year will be, to look at some space design so that we can move forward with that renovation in the next couple of years. But I think it was maybe fortunate, the timing, in a way, because we certainly use our space a little differently than we used to in the past.
Okay, well, it would be helpful perhaps at some point to get a timeline for those upgrades, and maybe it comes to the next executive director, or maybe that's a legacy document that Chuck will have to provide for us. But I think we need to keep an eye on that, because quite frankly, if you haven't been in some of the staff areas, it's not necessarily ideal. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to add on to Julie's response, fundamental or rudimentary carpeting and painting has been completed for those areas that need it in the staff offices.
And then, Mr. Chairman, if I could add to, in the FY 2025.
Your audio broke up on us again.
I'm going to have to change my mic, apparently. I apologize for just making the point that FY 2025 here, we do have the possibility of hours allocated model. So that is a part of the budget.
Thank you very much. So if you didn't catch that, it is part of the in the 5-year plan, dollars allocated for those purposes. And I will note, I think it's my recollection, Mr. Bean, that as fixtures and furniture becomes unusable, or as Ms. Gross described, not necessarily suitable to good occupational standards, we do replace those.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, all those items have a life cycle, and when they reach their life cycle, those are replaced.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that question and the discussion from Ms. Gross's question. Any others from members from the Commonwealth of Virginia? How about the District of Columbia? Okay. With that, we'll now move to a vote on consideration of the FY23 capital expenditure plan. So are there any abstentions? Are there any nay votes? Hearing none and none, the motion passes. Move next to item number 9 on our agenda, which is the Climate and Energy Leadership Awards. These awards recognize organizations in our region that work to advance regional climate and energy goals established by us here at COG, while also prioritizing historically underserved populations in the planning of their programs. So today we have the opportunity to recognize one government and one non-government organization for their outstanding efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to advance equity across the region. So I would now like to welcome our Climate, Energy, and Policy Committee Chair, Karan Sains, who will be joined by COG's Air and Climate Public Advisory Committee Vice Chair, Araya Pandya, to recognize the award recipients. We're also going to get an opportunity to see a short video from the awardees. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Sains.
All right, thank you, Chair Dorsey. Good afternoon, everybody. Glad to be with you today. First, I'd like to acknowledge my co-presenter today, Vice Chair Ara Pandayi of the Air, Climate, and Public Advisory Committee. I'll be doing one award, and they'll be doing the second award. The Air, Climate, Public Advisory Committee's leadership and the entire committee put a lot of time into the award program, including reviewing and judging the applications. Thank you for your efforts. Before we announce the awards, I also want to thank the artists who designed and created the awards since the start of the program in 2014. Janet Wittenberg is a local artist that created the beautiful handcrafted piece of art, and those awards will be handed out to the award recipients at a later date, since we're not presenting it in person today. Now on to the awards. The program this year sought to recognize environmental programs that showed outstanding efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and promoted equitable community engagement. We are awarding in only 2 categories this year, one in local jurisdiction and one in governmental organization. After the awards are announced, we'll show a short video clip featuring the awardees. In the government category, the awardee is Fredericks County's Department of Climate and Energy, Division of Energy and Environment for its Power Saving Outreach and Engagement Initiative for Vulnerable Communities Project. Since 2014, through the Maryland Energy Administration's Low to Moderate Income Grant Program and county investment of $300,000, the Power Saver Retrofits Program has provided Energy Star audits and energy-saving home improvements to moderate and low-income households, including the installation of efficient HVAC system upgrades to expand outreach beyond word of mouth. Frederick County worked with nonprofit partners to engage in the community equity conversations to build better relationships in limited English proficiency groups. Results of the project show that from 2014 to 2021, the Power Saver Retrofits program served 655 moderate and low income households. And for the fiscal year 2020 program, households saved approximately $624 in utility cost on average. Okay, and I'll hand it off to the Vice Chair Pandi to present the second award now.
Thank you, Chair Sains. So in the non-governmental category, the second awardee is Rise and Shine Foundation, saying, can we do something about food waste project? I'm very excited to award this project because it is a student-led initiative. Srishti Amula, founder of Rise and Shine Foundation and a high school student at Richard Montgomery High School, embarked on a group research project on food waste and its effects on climate. The goals of the project are to divert food waste from incinerators or landfills to compost facilities, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and to reduce food from restaurants and grocery stores from becoming food waste and provide it to the vulnerable communities. The student group also adopted an elementary school in Montgomery County, Maryland as a pilot and committed time and effort to implement the composting program. The foundation now runs the composting program at 5 local schools. The total estimated weight diverted from the program is 17.6 tons, which is equivalent to the GHG emissions from over 35,300 miles driven by an average passenger vehicle. I think it is time for the video now.
Excellent.
I want to thank the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments for recognizing Frederick County's Division of Energy and Environment for their focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We know vulnerable populations face great risks from climate change. Our goal is to help traditionally underserved communities become more resilient. With grant support from the Maryland Energy Administration, the Power Savers Retrofit Program uses community partnerships and targeted outreach to engage people who speak Spanish, Mandarin, and other languages. Together, we have helped families save an average of $624 a year on their utility bills. It's all about making life better for the people we serve.
Hi, my name is Srishti Amula, and I'm the founder of Rise and Shine Foundation, a student-led nonprofit organization. On behalf of all of our members, I'd like to thank the Council of Governments for this award. It's an honor to receive it in recognition for all of our efforts and dedication to the fight against climate change. Rise and Shine strives to address the food waste and hunger issues in our community in a full circle method. First, we recover food from businesses that would go to landfills because they often throw out their products before it goes to waste. And we donate it to local shelter homes and food pantries across our county in an attempt to address the hunger issue in our community as well. For the food that does go to waste, we run composting programs in local schools to collect food scraps and divert it to composting facilities to reduce greenhouse gases. Again, thank you so much for this award.
Well, that sure was uplifting. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Sains and Ms. Pandia. We very much appreciate your presenting that, and certainly congratulations to our awardees. I'd like to acknowledge County Executive from Frederick County, Jan Gardner, is with us. She's resplendent in a different red outfit than she was in the video, but Jan, congratulations. Terrific work, and we're just so thrilled to see the impact that's going on in our region. And for one, we'll be keeping an eye on Ms. Amula, founder of an organization already. I expect great things from her. Let's just hope she keeps that talent and energy in our region. That was terrific. Let's now move on to item number 10, which is an update on our regional climate goals. So we'll invite back Executive Director Bean, along with our Senior Environmental Planner, Maya Davis, and White House Office of Science and Technology Policy Assistant, Gretchen Goldman, Assistant Director Gretchen Goldman, who will brief us on ongoing efforts to meet the goals of the 2030 Climate and Energy Action Plan and the status of meeting the 2020 and 2030 greenhouse emissions goals. After the presentation, we will then consider Resolution R49 2022, endorsing regional climate mitigation and resiliency goals. So we'll turn it over back to you, Mr. Bean.
Thank you, Chair Dorsey. I would also like to thank Supervisor Sains, the chair of our Climate, Energy, and Environment Policy Committee, and all of the chairs of CPC over this last decade for their leadership and support for moving local climate planning and implementation forward. Next slide, please. Just a quick reminder, this climate work fits into the board's other top priorities as outlined in our Region United framework for 2030. We believe these priorities are interconnected, therefore we are embracing actions that advance multiple goals. Prioritizing sustainable energy access for all our residents, increasing transit use and decreasing the number of solo drivers, and creating more housing options that use less energy. Next slide. Today we'll be focusing on the climate goals. Next slide, please. On this slide are the greenhouse gas emission reduction goals adopted by the COG board over time. The first regional GHG emission reduction goal was set back in 2008, and that was to get 10% below business as usual projections by 2012, essentially bringing the region back to 2005 levels. And the region met that first goal. The next goal established by the COG board was to reduce 20% below 2005 levels by 2020. And I'm very pleased to announce today that we have met the 2020 goal. Maya will be going through the details of that analysis. After Maya, and then after Gretchen, there's a resolution before you today that recognizes the need for cooperative local, state, regional, and federal action to meet our future climate goals. That reinforces the need for local governments to lead by example and recommits to equitable and collaborative actions to scale up and leverage our impact. Now I'd like to call on Maya Davis for more on the background, the trends and the actions that helped us achieve the 2020 goal, and the actions that will support our work going forward. Maya.
Thank you, Director Bean. This timeline tracks with the resolution you have before you today and provides a little background and history. The regional climate planning efforts stem directly from the COG board's leadership. The board adopted the regional climate goals and created one of the first regional climate programs in the country. The board then established CPC, or our Climate, Energy, and Environment Policy Committee, to support moving the region toward the goals you adopted. And in addition to recognizing Karan Sains for his leadership as chair of CPC this year, I'd also like to recognize CPC members and COG board members here today, Penny Gross, Dave Snyder, and Ann Wheeler for their leadership on CPC. The work we've done with CPC and collaboratively with our members has led to recognition by the White House and the Global Covenant of Mayors. The board again set direction for us and established aggressive climate goals for 2030. And CPC has developed a plan to move the region towards those 2030 goals. Next slide, please. From the start and still to this day, one of CPC's top priorities has been for 100% of COG member local jurisdictions and the region to develop and update greenhouse gas inventories. CPC asked COG staff to lead this work so that all members can track progress towards our common goals and to have all inventories be consistent and comparable. We have just completed our standard calculations for 2020 greenhouse gas emissions and have confirmed the region has reduced emissions by at least 24% below 2005 levels, thus meeting the 20% by 2020 goal. In addition, per capita emissions have reduced from 15 metric tons of CO2 equivalent per person to around 9.5. Another key takeaway from this slide is that the energy used in the region, in our buildings and for transportation, account for 90% of greenhouse gas emissions in our region. That's 90%. So that's where we're going to focus our attention when we talk about actions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, is in the building and transportation sectors. Next slide, please. This slide shows what is driving changes in greenhouse gas emissions between inventory years. Here, we're comparing 2005 emissions to 2020. And the top 3 drivers of greenhouse gas reduction have been a cleaner electric grid, reduced VMT per person, and decreased commercial energy intensity. Next slide, please. So we're going to take just a couple minutes to dive a little bit deeper into the data and key performance indicators that show progress towards our climate goals. And for buildings, 2 key factors impact emissions for electricity. And that is how clean is our grid and what our total energy consumption in our buildings are. So although our electricity consumption has increased, electricity emissions have decreased because the grid has gotten significantly cleaner. Natural gas consumption compared to 2005 has also slightly decreased. We've seen tremendous growth in rooftop solar systems. We had less than 500 systems in 2009 when we began tracking. And in 2020, we surpassed 51,000 systems. Third-party certified green buildings have also grown significantly, from less than 90 buildings in 2005 to more than 5,300 in 2020. Next slide, please. So the 2 main key performance indicators for transportation as it relates to greenhouse gas emissions are how clean are our cars on the road and are we reducing VMT? From 2012 to 2020, electric and hybrid vehicle ownership grew by more than 100,000 in our region. Now, the majority of these are hybrid electric vehicles, but we've also had tremendous growth in our battery electric and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles that need an EV charging station. They've grown from under 500 in 2012 to more than 33,000 in 2020. And we need to support those owners of these electric vehicles with a robust network of charging stations. Those charging stations have grown from just over 100 in 2012 to more than 1,200 in 2021. Now, as far as VMT, the region has accommodated growth while reducing vehicle miles traveled by 15% between 2010 and 2020. Supporting VMT reduction is focusing growth near high capacity transit, which has helped reduce drive-alone trips. The region has also been adopting teleworking since 2010, but of course that significantly expanded during the pandemic as well. Next slide, please. So over that time period from 2012 or 2005 to 2020, we've seen progress on these indicators across that time frame. We have a cleaner grid, we have cleaner cars on the road, we have more efficient buildings, we have less VMT per person. We do recognize that the pandemic did increase the anticipated reduction in a few key sectors. So building emissions were lower than what we had previously projected for 2020. And yes, in part, that's due to the pandemic. However, the grid getting cleaner is really the main reason that we've seen emissions reduce in the building sector. Weather also played a role. Transportation emissions were lower than projected for 2020 because less people were on the roads and flying during the height of the pandemic. Solid waste emissions were also slightly lower than anticipated. However, the changes were not significant enough to make an impact on the overall emission reductions that we've seen. Next slide, please. So we just talked about 2005 to 2020 trends, and here's what we've identified that we need to do to get to the 50% by 2030 goal that you on the board adopted. The key areas are the building sector, which is clean electricity and zero energy buildings. The key areas for the transportation sector are zero emission vehicles and encouraging mode shift and travel behavior changes. So looking forward to 2030, we're not talking about the low-hanging fruit anymore. We need to push towards the zeros. Zero carbon or carbon neutral grid, zero energy buildings, zero emission vehicles, and zero waste. Next slide, please. This slide describes examples of planning initiatives and projects our team has led to support our local government members in meeting our common climate goals. We provide a variety of types of support in the areas of planning, policy, and implementation, data and tools, as well as outreach and training. I'd like to focus for a moment on that first bullet for local planning. We have new contracts being signed this month with 6 contractors to provide expert planning and implementation support in all the sectors of strategies needed to meet our 2030 goals. COG member communities can engage with these contracts and receive support from COG staff through an MOU with COG. The communities currently engaging with us are highlighted in the map on this slide. You can also access these contracts directly through the COG rider clause. Another example I'll point out is we are jump-starting an EV work group per your direction at the last COG board meeting. And lastly, I'd like to highlight DMV Climate Partners, because when you all on the COG board adopted the 2030 climate goals, those included a call for expanding education on climate change. And since that time, we've launched DMV Climate Partners website and revamped our DMV Climate Clips e-news so that we can, on a weekly basis, share local climate news, events, jobs, resources for residents, and funding opportunities for our members. For anyone interested, we'd be happy to connect you with the clips. Next slide, please. Thank you for your time today. I will turn it back to Chuck.
Thank you, Maya. Today's announcement that we achieved our 2020 goals precedes a detailed report that we will complete and release before the end of the year. And if there's interest, that could be put on a roadshow to help learn what was achieved and how we can do more of that. Before we go to questions from the board and your consideration of resolution, I'd like to introduce Dr. Gretchen Goldman. Gretchen is the Assistant Director for Environmental Science, Engineering, Policy, and Justice at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, and the Research Director at the Center for Science and Democracy at the Union of Concerned Scientists. She is a climate change and air pollution expert, and from 2012 to 2020, in her personal time, she lent us her expertise as part of COG's Air and Climate Public Advisory Committee, where she served as vice chair and then chair from 2017 to 2018. And as part of her leadership on ACPAC, she also served on the Climate, Energy, and Environment Policy Committee. Gretchen supported the development of the Climate Awards program that was just presented to you, the Environmental Justice Toolkit, and incorporating equity into our climate work. We thought it was important because as we pull as local jurisdiction and as the region, it's incredibly important to have a cooperative federal partner. So we're hoping that Gretchen can lend some of her thoughts on the local, regional, and national work to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Dr. Goldman.
Great. Thank you so much, Director Bean. It's super great to be back. I am really excited to be here, especially as you noted, given my time on the Air and Climate Public Advisory Committee and hearing and being adjacent to COG's work for many years. So I'm so excited to hear about your meeting the DC region's greenhouse gas emissions reductions goals. This is a huge accomplishment, and I'm glad you're taking the time to celebrate that. And I also wanted to take the time now to appreciate the larger context of this in our nation's ability to tackle the climate crisis broadly. As many of you might know, on day one, President Biden fulfilled his promise to rejoin the Paris Agreement, and he set us on a course to address climate change by setting a target of net zero emissions economy-wide by no later than 2050. And the Biden-Harris administration is committed now and devoting significant resources to tackling the climate crisis and addressing environmental injustices broadly. And the administration has set an ambitious goal of at least 50% reduction from 2005 levels in economy-wide net greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, building on our nation's progress to date. And so I'm so pleased to see the DC region has set the same goal. We cannot meet national goals without that same level of commitment from local leaders like all of you. And importantly, this goal is consistent with the science and all of our collective need to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius in order to avoid the worst impacts of climate change in the future. And this target builds on the leadership from and was enabled by all of you as mayors, county executives, as well as governors, tribal leaders, businesses, investors, and communities who have all worked tirelessly to ensure that we've had sustained progress in reducing climate pollution across the US. And so building on and benefiting from that foundation, this 2030 goal really accelerates the pace of emissions reductions that we've seen, as you've just heard Maya mention. And there's multiple paths for us to reach these goals. And you all have many tools available to you to work with civil society and the private sector in different ways to mobilize investments and meet these goals while supporting a strong economy. And so some important elements of these tools are in the historic set of bills that was passed by Congress this year and last, the Inflation Reduction Act, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, and the CHIPS and Science Act, which will all be a really significant boost in reaching these goals by 2030 and beyond. And many of those historic investments in the Inflation Reduction Act include the largest investment ever made to tackle the climate crisis. And that law will lower household energy bills, it will pull clean tech to market, and it advances environmental justice with huge investments in underserved communities. And that's the bill that gets a lot of the attention in the climate space, but I also want to lift up the tremendous opportunity that we have on climate action because that bill can work together with the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the CHIPS and Science Act. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Law is building clean tech infrastructure and supply chains. It's increasing our nation's climate resilience, and it's investing in workers. And the CHIPS and Science Act is driving equitable clean tech innovation, manufacturing, and regional economic growth. So together, these three laws can unlock new possibilities because we're building the infrastructure, the technology, the innovation, and the comprehensive industrial policy that are necessary to tackle the climate crisis. And so investments from all of these bills are now going out the door, and that work is happening across the federal government to coordinate and accelerate these investments to get them into the hands of the communities. And this is the first step in a lot of what we're going to continue as a nation. And it's a huge opportunity to keep building on these climate emissions reductions that you just heard about and that we're all already working to make. And importantly, we're not stopping with these bills and these past actions, but the administration's continuing to take climate actions through rulemaking, through boosting scientific and technical capacity, and through focus on implementation of these programs and investments. And all of these actions are grounded in science and the prioritization of public health benefits. And so, as you know, to make real and lasting progress to tackle the climate crisis, we can't stop at the federal level. We need action on the ground by states, tribes, cities, and towns across the country. And communities like yours are critical to ensuring that our national climate actions are realized. Because you know best where investments are needed, where they can be leveraged for even more emissions reductions in the future, and where communities will help ensure that that those improvements are sustained and improved upon long into the future. And indeed, the DC region is already a national leader in this space, as you heard Maya say. And so you are playing this critical role in advancing a lot of these unprecedented investments and prioritization of climate actions and racial equity and environmental justice as well. You're in a position to really listen to communities and learn from them, and especially communities that are most affected by climate change. So as decision makers, we can listen and we can act on what communities need and ensure that the climate action investments that are the most effective that they can be. And so lastly, I want to make the point that many of the climate and environmental justice and equity initiatives that have been happening under the Biden-Harris administration would have seemed unimaginable for a presidential administration only a few years ago. But they're here and they're happening now, and that's because a few people decided to dream big and they decided to listen to community needs. And now there's people like you at all levels of government working to implement these bold initiatives. And so I hope you'll continue to dream big and build on this impressive success on greenhouse gas emissions reductions, and continue playing this pivotal role that you're playing to build us a cleaner, more sustainable, and more equitable world in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Goldman. And with that, I'll turn it back to Chair Dorsey, and we look forward to board members' questions and comments and consideration of the resolution on page 77 of the board packet.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bean and Dr. Goldman and Ms. Davis. We very much appreciate, the discussion and presentation thus far. I expect that we will have more among board colleagues. Why don't we start by getting a resolution on the table? And so is anyone willing to offer a motion to approve Resolution R49, 2022?
I move the motion.
Supervisor Briskman moves to adopt.
All right. Well, unfortunately, Supervisor Briskman, Mayor Stewart got to you first, but I'm going to recognize you as a second, if that works well. All right. Excellent. So let's now have discussion, and I'll take chair's prerogative to begin, but then we'll go and hear from as many people as are interested in speaking. The resolution itself is really, I think, just a great piece of work that recognizes our success thus far as a region. It also commends all of the work that has been done by the jurisdictions and our policy staff, as well as our policy committee, in getting to this outcome. But also importantly, it calls on us to redouble our efforts and to make sure that we don't get satisfied with the progress thus far to the exclusion of being committed to the progress that's necessary to achieve the 2030 and 50 goals. And that also we are mindful that any benefits that are produced for our region are equitably distributed, particularly for communities that have not enjoyed the benefits of such progress, and also that any burdens are equitably shared throughout our region. So in short, it's a resolution that calls for us to continue to level up while making sure we even out both the benefits and burdens. So I am thrilled that we have this on our agenda today, and I'd now like to recognize anyone who would like to speak on it. Why don't we start first with members from the Commonwealth of Virginia this time?
Mr. Chairman, any
All right, Ms. Gross.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm trying to remember when CPC was created. I think it must have been 2007, 2008. I've been on the committee the entire time and chaired it at one point. And when we set these stretch goals, there were a lot of skeptics and naysayers. You'll never be able to do it. It's not going to work. But we met them. The region worked together, and it proves what we've always known, that we are stronger together. When we collaborate, our region continues to be a leader. And so we did dream big, and we are dreaming big. But I also want to say a word about some of the early folks who were part of this. When I think about what we've seen today with these graphs and charts, I'm thinking of Stuart Freudberg, who was really sort of the conscience behind a lot of this. And also Steve Walls, who worked at COG for quite a while. And then, of course, now Jeff and Maya has been, Jeff and Maya have been with us the entire time, I think. But Stuart and Steve were both, they were prescient, they were positive, they continued to push. We pushed them a little, they pushed us. And look what we've gotten. So my comments are simply comments. I don't have a question. I'm just so very, very pleased that what we started a long time ago is showing the results that it is now. Because when we started, a lot of people were wringing their hands that we will never be able to do it. It's just too hard. We proved them wrong. Thank you.
And thank you, Supervisor Gross, for your work from CPC's inception and steadfastly throughout. And we very much appreciate your comments recognizing the contributions of others. I see Ann Wheeler and then Julie Briskman.
Yeah, I'll be quick. I just want to say I know that Prince William County wasn't highlighted on the map, but we do have people helping us do our plan and sustainability and greenhouse gas reductions plan. So we've really made a lot of progress on that in the last year. But I just want to say I'm grateful for COG bringing out what I would consider sort of factual information and setting the framework to move forward. There's always a lot of differing opinions out there, and having this to work with and work from, I find is really, really beneficial. So I just want to say that. So thank you for all the hard work.
Thank you, Chair Wheeler. Supervisor Briskman.
Thank you, Chair Dorsey. I couldn't jump faster to either move for this or second it. I'm extremely proud of the work. I know that Loudoun County, we are working on our energy plan as well, and we have established an environmental commission to work on these issues. I do remain concerned about the amount of energy that the data centers use in Loudoun County, so we'll be watching that closely and look forward to the continued work on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Briskman. And Mr. Snyder.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. There's an element here that I want to emphasize, which is the improvement in air quality that we've had in this region, which has been absolutely dramatic. And I'm wondering if there is sufficient recognition of our collective work at the federal, state, and local levels, not only to deal with greenhouse gases, but cleaning up our air. We're going to set a record this year of the right kind of record, the cleanest air I think we've had in 20 years or so. So I just want to emphasize that point as well. The collective effort is what will win the day for us. We've proven it in air quality, and I think we're proving it in greenhouse gas reduction. So thank you for the opportunity to make a couple comments.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder. Now I'd like to recognize CPC Chair Sains, please.
Thank you, Chair Dorsey. Yeah, I think it's great that we've met our goals. So congratulations everybody on their efforts. I think we need to continue to do our parts. And now, when I was chairing this year for CPC, one of my goals was to make sure we are tackling the low-hanging fruit. I know we always talk about the big pie in the sky ideas and looking further down the road, but I just want to encourage everybody to continue to tackle the low-hanging fruit, because sometimes we can overlook the small things. So continue to get those things done, and that'll take us and continue us on this path of meeting our goals that we set for our region. And let's make sure when we're sharing this information and talking about initiatives that we're also not over talking over people's heads sometimes, because sometimes we get bogged down in the very technical, and sometimes that can be missed by the folks who are not policy wonks who like to read packets like we do every single day. I'm encouraged by what we're doing, and encourage everybody to continue to do the great work that we're doing every single day in the region, and also to make sure we are sharing best practices, so we are not reinventing the wheel every single time in all the different jurisdictions. So that's one of the reasons why I love COG and will continue to support COG and the efforts every single day. So thank you for the opportunity to present earlier the awards and share with you now.
Thank you so much for your leadership and words well spoken. Any other comments from members from the Commonwealth? Okay, we'll now move next to members from the District of Columbia. Members of the District of Columbia are quite reticent today. I'm just not used to this. I don't know how to process it. Is
Well,
everything
Mr.
okay?
Mr.
Thumbs up.
Chairman,
Wow.
Our
Mr. Chair-
silence is supportive.
Wow. Wow.
Yes, and Mr. Chairman, I would say that this goal comports very well with the mayor's goal. So we are appreciative of this work.
And thank you, Ms. Perry, for bringing that up. It's really great that we have such alignment at both the levels of our respective states. And it's even so nice that the federal government followed our lead and adopted our goal, the framework for our goal. Right, right, Dr. Goldman? Is she still here? All right.
Yes,
I
glad
love.
that could happen in that order.
All right, beautiful. Next, we'll move to recognize members from Maryland. All right, Mayor Stewart.
All right, well, we couldn't let Marilyn not weigh in here on this and just say congratulations to everyone for the work. And I just want to extend my thanks to Dr. Goldman for her work when she did work with us here at COG and the work she's doing at the White House. And I would have been remiss, given that Dr. Goldman is a constituent and lives and is from Tacoma Park. So to just thank her and thank the whole COG staff, my board colleagues, those who came before us for doing this work. And as we're looking forward into the future to really double down on our efforts. So thank you, everyone.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes. Is that first? I'd like to recognize Ms. Jackson, and then who was that?
Mayor Adams.
Mayor Adams, you'll be after Ms. Jackson if you wouldn't mind. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to commend COG staff. Really pleased with this collaboration. We all know that communities of color are disproportionately impacted by environmental hazards and climate change. And I'm just so pleased with the focus on equity as we continue to move forward and have this discussion.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. And moving next, Mayor Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to echo what we've heard. I think the words you spoke earlier really hit home. And I think what we just heard from my colleague about the equity involved, but more importantly, the words you said about all the great things that have come before won't matter as much if we don't stay focused and continue to do the hard work that so many people have laid the groundwork for. So I just want to say congratulations to everyone who came before us and all those who have participated in making this happen. But I look forward to us carrying that torch, that banner forward to make sure that we continue to do that positive work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor Adams. Are there any other comments from members from Maryland? All right, seeing and hearing none, we'll now move to a vote. Are there any abstentions from this item? Are there any nay votes? Hearing none and none, I will embellish and say that this motion unanimously and overwhelmingly passes. Thanks so much, colleagues, and congratulations really to us all. And, you know, it's not usual in our work that we seek to have a race to the bottom, but in this case, our next challenge is a race to zero. Maya, your words are very impactful. You know, our future is about zero energy buildings. It's about zero waste. It is a race to go as low as we can go. And let's have that competitive spirit guide us all. And may we all succeed in pushing each other to a race to zero. Thank you all very much. As we move on with our agenda, we have the next item, which is an update from our Food and Agriculture Regional Member, lovingly known as the Farm Policy Committee. And we are joined by Chair Mary Che and Vice Chairs Craig Rice and John Staley, who will brief us on the priorities and work program of the committee and advocacy efforts that are underway to improve the region's food security. At the conclusion of the presentation, we will be asked to consider Resolution R50 2022, endorsing the federal child tax credit and universal free school meal policy idea. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Chair Mary Che.
Thank you very much. And could we advance the slide to the next slide? There we go. Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. On behalf of myself and my vice chairs, the Farm Policy Committee, we're really glad to be here. The last time we presented here, which was about a year ago, you made what I would characterize as the forward-thinking, perhaps even visionary decision to make the Farm Committee a permanent one and create a special fund to support it. So I want to give you some highlights of what our committee has done in that time. Following the highlights, Councilmember Rice will share some observations from the White House Conference on Hunger, Nutrition and Health that was held 2 weeks ago. He will also provide a few comments on what is ahead for us as a Farm Committee. And finally, you'll hear from Councilmember Staley, who will ask you to consider and pass a resolution in support of several federal policies that we need to improve childhood food security. And so if we could, oh, here we are, next slide, thank you. Here are some of the things that the Farm Policy Committee has accomplished in the last year. First, our committee has grown to include all interested COG member jurisdictions, including several of our municipalities like Bladensburg, College Park, Falls Church, Laurel, and Tacoma Park. We recently updated our bylaws to reflect that Farm is a permanent policy committee of the board, adding terms for committee leadership and our non-elected official members. Last fall, we held a special meeting to learn about land access and other challenges facing farmers identifying as Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Related to this, we've created 2 new work groups, one of which will be focusing on research and solutions in the intersection of 2 of Farm's priorities, supporting BIPOC and small farmers, and leveraging procurement to support equity and the region's food and farm economy. Over the last year, we've continued to support information sharing on proposed state and federal legislation, which would improve food security and food system resilience. To provide a few examples, we've supported key pieces of legislation like the Maryland Farm to Food Security Act, which among other provisions dedicates some state funding for matching nutrition incentives at farmers markets and creates a new program to help emergency food assistance providers to procure Maryland agricultural products for their clients. We also supported the first ever state funding for the Virginia Fresh Match program that SNAP participants can use to increase their purchasing power at farmers markets and some small retailers. Our efforts to improve federal policy and funding for school meals is ongoing, and you'll be hearing more about that later. Could I have the next slide, please? A few other items that I want to bring to your attention include finalizing and releasing the Healthy Food Access Policy Compendium for Metropolitan Washington. This is a comprehensive resource which includes federal, state, and local policies supporting food security and healthy food access in the region. It's a baseline to work from as we assess what more we need to do to end food insecurity and increase equity and resilience in our food system. We sent the compendium with a letter to the White House outlining our priorities for the new national strategy on hunger, nutrition, and health this summer. We've also held site visits for members of the Farm Committee and COG staff, Regional Agricultural Work Group. On the right, you'll see several of us on a Montgomery County ride-on bus. Oh, see, we're all there. What we're doing is we're hearing a lecture. We're learning from farmer Linda Lewis about her family's fruit and vegetable operation. And in that regard, I'll take this moment to thank the county's Office of Agriculture for hosting the visit last month. Finally, COG staff and the Ag Work Group anticipate unveiling a new nationalcapitalfarms.org website next year to showcase food and agricultural production and farmers, both urban and rural, in metropolitan Washington. And let me just say, one of our great strengths, like many of our COG committees, is that we are always learning from and about each other. That's so powerful and so important. Now, there's more we could share over the last year, but I want to now turn it over to Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Appreciate it. And great to be with you guys today. It certainly is a pleasure to be able to be talking about some of the great further policy changes that we need to do to improve food security and health outcomes in our communities. I attended the recent White House conference on hunger, nutrition, and health, as did 4 other members of the COG Farm Policy Committee. So we were very well represented. It was the first White House conference held on this topic since the Nixon administration. So it's been quite a while since we've met to talk about these particular issues. And of course, it took some work to really make this conference happen and to bring it to fruition. And Farm, as a committee, advocated for the conference. And so it was really great to see this actually happen. As an outcome of the conference, there was a release of what may be the first national strategy we've ever had on hunger, nutrition, and health. So that's really exciting. And it's significant that the strategy actually recognized some of the root causes of hunger and the critical connection between diet and health. The strategy itself calls for the whole of society response, and it would be wise for the Farm Committee and our states and local governments to see how the strategy recommendations stack up with what we're already doing in our region. Many of us know that we've already invested significantly to make these kinds of things happen. Now, the national strategy includes administrative actions that the federal government can take to improve food security and access to healthy food, but it also depends on Congress to enact legislation like passing the Childhood Nutrition Reauthorization for the first time in 12 years to continue to improve access to school meals. We all know how much of an impact that has had on our community. And so from that standpoint, we need to ensure that that continues. Now, the conference also provided a forum to share other innovative ideas. The one I wrote down was shared with Chef Jose Andres, who called for the creation of food improvement districts. Now, this is something that I really think that we could do as elected leaders, and I know that COG staff is starting to talk with potential research partners about studying what a successful pilot or pilots of this concept would look like. I'll just share with you that I also had an opportunity to talk to Chef Jose Andres also about this, in addition, when it came to many of the things that we're looking at regarding food insecurity. And he was very excited to work with this region to make sure that those things happen. Next slide, please. So it was an energizing moment to be sure, but accomplishing the goal to end hunger by 2030 will require a lot of federal action and innovative work from us locally. This will not be limited to policy and funding decisions, which will continue to be essential, but new partnerships with private sector nonprofits, our hospitals, colleges, and universities too. So what's next? We welcome all of you to join us this Friday online for Farm's first annual forum with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. We'll be meeting with the Mid-Atlantic Regional Administrator of USDA's Food and Nutrition Service and talking about issues like SNAP, WIC, school meals, healthy food access at farmers markets, etc. And we'll also be completing a midpoint assessment of this year's work program to make any needed adjustments. Recently, we just supported a staff request to prioritize convening stakeholders to assess the potential for region to apply for a USDA award to provide technical assistance to farmers and food businesses. And finally, it's hard to believe it, but this may be the last time that Councilmember Che and myself present to you as COG members. I think that, as everyone knows, we'll be completing our tenure as legislators this fall. And our hope is that the founding vice chair, our colleague, Councilmember Staley, will be nominated as the next chair of the Farm Policy Committee. The three of us are committed, deeply committed, to working with the board, farm members, and staff to plan for a smooth transition. And the importance of us working together for a more food secure future remains very apparent. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Staley to provide some background on the action we hope that you will take today.
Well, thank you, Councilmember Rice, and you and Councilmember Che will be sorely missed, and I've enjoyed learning from you. I also want to let folks know that anytime you get to go to a White House event and get to meet Jaden from season 7 of MasterChef Junior, it's a good day. So thank you, Councilmember Rice, for keeping us up to date on your Twitter feed the entire way through. Where I'm here to talk about Resolution 50-2022 and to talk a little bit about what we're recognizing and seeing as a farm committee. As you've created the space for us to have this conversation, and Chair Dorsey, you teed it up in the beginning, this is about the value of sharing. And you've heard that from all of us here, of learning from each other. But now we need to be able to communicate this to our congressional delegation, affirming COG support for federal policies that are proven to reduce childhood food insecurity. This is National Schools Week, and for the first time in 2 years, school meals are no longer free to all our public school students. Congress failed to give USDA the authority to allow our schools to continue serving free meals to students, a policy Farm supports, at the time of increased food costs, heightened need for food, and ongoing supply chain challenges. While it appears there's opposition in Congress to prevent this for now, as a committee, we will support other efforts in the interim to expand access to school meals. However, the Farm Committee recommends and remains committed that free meals for all school children is the ultimate policy that should be permanently adopted by Congress and the USDA. Good nutrition is critical to learning. Providing meals to all kids reduces stigma, financial stress on families that may not qualify for free meals, but nonetheless contend with high costs of living. We are asking the board to affirm support for universal free school meals and suggest that our jurisdictions work with other school districts and school boards to understand the benefits and costs of meals for all. Doing so can inform future federal and potentially state or local actions to continue to expand free meals to students. Additionally, new census data shows the profound and positive impact that monthly childhood tax credit had on children last year. Child poverty, calculated by the Supplemental Poverty Measure, fell to its lowest on record level in 2021, declining from 9.7% in 2020 to 5.2% in 2021. The census examined 4 race and demographic categories and found childhood poverty rates to be the lowest since 2009 across all of them. The new National Strategy on Hunger, Nutrition, and Health that Councilmember Rice talked about calls on Congress to make the child tax credit permanent. We believe there's a possibility that the child tax credit will be taken up in Congress after the midterm election. This and universal school meals are consistent with COG's legislative priority to strengthen our programs that support childhood nutrition and well-being. So we hope the board will endorse Resolution 50-2022 in support of both. Thank you, Chair Dorsey, for the opportunity to present.
Thank you very much, Council Members Staley, Rice, and Che. And forgive me for not recognizing that the calendar and the state of affairs does in fact mean that this is likely the last opportunity that Council Members Rice and Che will be with us, at least in this capacity, as active elected officials serving as leadership of the Farm Committee. We do look forward to your next acts, which I know will be in some form of regional service to us, which may bring you back before this body again. But we certainly thank you for your leadership efforts in your respective jurisdictions, but also to the region and as of late in standing up this incredible effort that you three have brought forward with establishing and sort of maturing the Farm Committee to produce such a substantial and needed body of work. So thanks to the three of you, but to the two of you who we may not hear from much longer. So I'd now like to have a motion to consider Resolution R50-2022 as described by Councilmember Staley. Is there a motion to adopt?
Gross moves.
Okay, Ms. Gross, thank you so much. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Allen. I'll spread it around and make sure this is a regional effort. So thank you very much for the motion and the second. Let's go ahead and have discussion. And I'd first like to recognize members from the District of Columbia, if there are any questions or comments. Next, we'll move to members from Maryland. And now I'll ask if there are any comments or questions from members from the Commonwealth of Virginia.
I have a comment.
Supervisor Briskman.
Thank you. I really appreciate the work of the committee and specifically for the lunches for the kids. I just wanted to personally invite the farm committee to come out and tour some farms in Loudoun County. We have our farm tour fall weekend is this weekend actually, which is short notice. But Loudoun County is #1 in acres of grapes, #1 in the state for producing honey. We produce hogs, we produce cheese, and all sorts of other items in agriculture in Loudoun County. We have 1,259 farms and 121,000 acres of farming in Loudoun County. So I believe that if the farm committee would like to come out and learn a little bit more about what's going on in Loudoun County as far as farming goes, we would be more than happy to host. Thank you.
Is that also available to chairs of the
Anybody.
board who are not part of the committee? I'd like to.
Anybody. God, we'd love to have anybody.
All right, excellent.
Just go to biz.loudoun.gov.
All right.
It's this weekend and it's free. We also do a one in the spring, but I've really been wanting the farm committee to come out and learn about Loudoun farms as well and take some tours like they did in Montgomery County. Thank you.
Excellent. Any other questions or comments from members from the Commonwealth? I'll take this opportunity to just say I'm really thrilled to support your policy recommendations. And I'm glad to hear that no one has any concerns with them. I've only recently become really acutely aware of the benefits that a universal free school meal program can really provide, not just to students who are from income constrained or marginalized families, reducing stigmas or barrier to accessing services that they're eligible for a multitude of reasons. But as you think about students broadly, the normalizing of meals for everyone can help accrue benefits to students of all economic levels who may not necessarily have sufficient nutritionally sound meals throughout the school day. And as we think about increasing the ability for students to maximize their potential in a learning environment, it's only going to come from making sure there is access to sufficient nutrition, and cost is not always the only reason why that's unattainable for students. But of course, most of all, this is a way to absolutely level a playing field for students from income constrained families who suffer most of all. So I just applaud this work. Think it's terrific, and I'm happy that there's a resolution giving COG an opportunity to lend its weight behind it. Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, we'll move to the votes. And first, are there any abstentions? Are there any nay votes? Hearing none and none, this motion hereby passes. Thank you all very much. We appreciate the work. I'd now like to see if any members would like to propose any additional business for our consideration this afternoon. Seeing none, thank you all for participating in today's virtual meeting. We're really thrilled at the presenters and guests that we've had to walk us through this agenda with some really exciting news that we're able to share and some exciting initiatives that we are going to be promoting. Thank you very much, and encourage you all to make sure that you bring the same energy and attendance to our next meeting on November 9th, which is going to be in person. We'll look forward to seeing you there. And remember, you have 1 week until October the 19th to submit your nominations for the COG awards that will be presented at the annual meeting. So I encourage you all to do so. And it is the best thing for the chair of a meeting to be able to do is to give you all 20 minutes of your day that you were not expecting to have. And with that, I now call this meeting to a close. We are adjourned.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye, everyone, and thank you,
Bye,
Mr. Chair.
everyone. Great meeting, Mr. Chairman.
Get you out early and you think it's great. I love it.
Yeah, yeah.